A very good evening to one and all. I welcome you all to this newspaper analysis initiative. These are the articles that are important from the UPSC perspective. Without any further delay, let's begin with the first one. So, the first article for the day is the Supreme Court has raised a very important question. In today's digital world, how do we protect innocent users from harmful online content without curbing free speech? Okay. Why the Supreme Court intervened in the first place? The court noted that user generated content spreads instantly, and obscene, defamatory, or misleading videos can destroy reputations before even the platforms react. Okay, even the 24 hours which are given is too slow. Victims often have no resources or voice to defend themselves. The current legal gap is we have laws for punishment after the harm, which is post occurrence penalty in laws like defamation, IT law, or criminal law, but nothing to prevent harm before publication. And that is why the court wants preventive mechanisms but without drifting into censorship. Okay, so what's the court's key suggestions are? The first one, we have to create an impartial autonomous authority. Okay, it should neither be a governmental body nor controlled by social media companies. They have also asked for a stronger age verification. That is, CJI even suggested Aadhaar based age checks for access to adult content and a stricter responsibility for users when creating their own channels because currently there is no accountability. And the court also added that the guidelines must not interfere with Article 19, which is guaranteeing freedom of speech and expression. So, the Supreme Court is asking for a balanced framework, one that preserves free speech but prevents irreversible harm caused by viral online content. The next article for the day is IMF gives C grade for India's national account statistics. So, the IMF has released its latest Article 4 review and it has given India's national accounts, that is basically our GDP and GVA data, a C grade. Now, what does that mean? A C doesn't mean data is missing. It simply means that data is regular, but the methodology has some weaknesses that make economic analysis a bit unreliable. Okay, now why did IMF give this grade? The IMF highlights a few issues regarding it. The first one is outdated base year. Our GDP and consumer price inflation still use the 2011-12 as base year. The economy has changed massively since then, like digital consumption, services boom, new markets, but our numbers still reflect the old structure. That is the first issue. The second one, use of wholesale price index, because we don't have a full producer price index yet, so we rely on wholesale prices for deflating the GDP, and this makes real GDP numbers less accurate. The third one, there is a big gap between the production GDP and expenditure GDP. There are repeated and large discrepancies between GDP calculated by production and GDP calculated by spending. This suggests there is an incomplete data, especially from the informal sector. Now, the fourth one, that is, there is no proper seasonal adjustment because quarterly GDP doesn't remove these seasonal effects like festivals, monsoon cycles, or agricultural patterns. So, this distorts the interpretation of growth trends. The fifth one is the statistical techniques that we are using needs an upgrade because the IMF pointed out that our modeling methods need to improve. The next one, for inflation data, the IMF has given consumer price inflation a B grade. That means the data is fine, But again, the base year and the basket goods are outdated and they may not reflect the present spending patterns. The next one is, what are India's national accounts statistics? These are published by the Ministry of Statistics and basically the backbone of our macroeconomic data. It includes GDP, GVA, consumption, investments, savings, all at current as well as constant prices. Okay, now how is this GDP calculated? India follows the United Nations system of national accounts standards, which gives like three methods. The first one is income approach. In income approach, this is the primary one, where they count the income of households, companies, and the government. The second one is the expenditure approach, which is a supplementary one. Here they add the consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. The third one is the GVA approach, that is gross value added. Here it is computed by value adding in each sector like agriculture, industry, and services. So these give us GDP, GVA, savings rate, investment rate, national income, as well as per capita figures. Okay, the next article that I have taken is from Business Page. This article is also related to IMF, so I combine both together so it will be easy to understand. So, the IMF in its Article 4 report made an assumption that the US imposed 50% tariffs on Indian goods will continue indefinitely. This is an assumption, and government of India has pushed back strongly against this. So, what is this dispute about? IMF says that if the 50% US tariffs stay permanently, then India's GDP growth will fall by this, especially 0.4 percentage next year and 0.3 percentage the next year after. But the center says that this assumption is unrealistic, and the tariffs will not stay forever. And government position is also very clear in this. They told that the tariffs will hurt some industries, but the overall impact is manageable. The IMF's growth loss estimate is too high because India is already front loading their exports and developing alternative markets. And they also told that coming with free trade agreements. And the center has also emphasized that global uncertainty is high, but India is positioning itself better through free trade agreements and diversification. The next article for the day is the Kamalasan case and it's a simple lesson. What this article says? This article says that the core ethical issue is there is a clash between freedom of conscience and military discipline or unit cohesion because both are legitimate values and it shows a classic ethical dilemma. Article 33 says that armed forces fundamental rights can be restricted to maintain discipline, and the court also said the same and said what the military said was correct. Then the next one is there is a proportionality question here because the officer respectfully participated in rituals except entering the sanctum, and this raises an issue that was dismissal of that officer proportionate to the act. So that raises this proportionality question. Then what about the need for a reasonable accommodation that we talk about? Because we can say that a minor flexibility, that is standing outside the sanctum, could also protect the unit discipline and sincerity of that officer's religious beliefs, and it will also boost the morale and also inclusivity. Now the ethical lesson that is that should be taken from this article is accommodation is possible without harming institutional goals, and that is the crux of this article. And why now they are talking about this institutional sensitivity? Because military unity is built on trust and inclusiveness and not majoritarian practices alone. So the leadership should resolve such issues internally and not let them to escalate to the Supreme Court. Okay, next. And there is a case specified in this article, which is Baijo Emmanuel and others versus State of Kerala. Okay, there the Supreme Court clearly declared that spirit of tolerance is a constitutional value. Okay, and these are the key points that you can take from this article, which will be very useful for your ethics. The next article for the day is, we will combine these two editorials that were in the newspaper. The first one is enabling a modern and future ready labor ecosystem, and the other one is, are the labor codes a labor friendly? Okay, so these are two diverse opinions, and we will look in detail about it. Regarding the first one, on 21st November, the government enforced all four labor codes like Code on Wages, Industrial Relations Code, Code on Social Security, and Occupational Safety and Working Conditions Code. Okay, this is India's biggest labor reform since independence, and comparing only to the GST consolidation. Okay, now why reform was needed in the first place? We earlier had 29 fragmented labor laws, which are outdated, inconsistent, and there is a high compliance cost associated with that. Okay, then the second National Commission on Labor, which recommended that consolidation of all these 29 laws into four broad codes. Okay, next, the workforce that we have is around 643 million workers, and most of them are informal. So old system of laws that we had could not cover them. Now, what are the major benefits for workers? The first benefit would be, it is providing uniform protection. That is like universal minimum wages, where we are fixing up a national floor wage. Then there is a return appointment letters have been told as a mandatory one. There is a 48-hour week clarity, and there is also clear mention of overtime payments also. So this shows that this kind of protection now becomes uniform. There are stronger occupational safety norms like safety committees, free annual health checkups, and now social security is also extended to gig workers, platform workers, and unorganized sector. And there is a universal ESIC coverage without any geographical limits. And they have also led to the creation of National Social Security Fund. So these are the major benefits for workers. Now, what are the major benefits for the industry? Okay, the biggest benefit is the compliance simplification, because complying with 29 laws will be high when comparing to only four codes. So there is this simplification ensures that there is a single registration, a single license, and single returns. And they have also come up with one definition of wages and decriminalize the minor offenses. Also, a predictable dispute resolution under industrial relations code has also given. Okay, now they also come up with something known as digital inspections, which is algorithm based and which lead to less harassment. This will definitely boost ease of doing business and formalization. Okay, the next one is women centric reforms, that is equal remuneration has been enforced, and night shift is now allowed with both safety as well as the consent, and stronger maternity and social protection is also extended to women. The next one is future of preparedness, because the gig or the platform workers now they are formally recognized under the social security code. This is very critical because their numbers or the worker numbers are expected to double by 2030. Okay, and this aligns with our digital and flexible and remote work models. See, India created around 16.83 crore jobs by 2017 to 2024, and the unemployment rate has also been down by 3.2%. And this shows that formalization is improving, and it is very much necessary that we streamline our labor ecosystem, majorly to improve the supply chain integration and India's role in global value chains. Okay, now let's look into the arguments against the labor codes. The first one is a centralization of power, because the codes reduce the role of states in labor regulation. Okay, and it is seen as an undemocratic drafting mainly because the unions are not consulted. Okay. The second one is there is something known as fixed term employment that which legalizes hire and fire, and it undermines the long term job security, and it also weakens the collective bargaining of workers. The third one is social security coverage is limited because currently only 7 percentage of the workers are covered, and this codes that they have come up with are unlikely to cover remaining 93 percentage of informal workers, and the gig workers what they are telling is a very small segment, and most informal workers still remain unprotected. Okay. The fourth one is there is a reduced minimum wage coverage because the occupational safety code raises the factory threshold limits. This shows that many small workplaces are still excluded. Okay, and the living wage concept that is being diluted here, and the center is empowered to set only a floor wage. Okay. Fifth one is these codes weakens the role of trade unions. Instead of strengthening the collective bargaining mechanisms, this has actually weakened them. And there is still a fear of job insecurity, and only fewer protections are given. So these are the arguments against the labor codes. Now, the other question is whether these codes will attract investment, and there is also diverse views here. The first one is with respect to the pro reforms, where they say there is a better regulatory clarity here. Okay, that is when you have like 29 laws, it becomes very difficult. Now there is a clear four codes, so it becomes regulatory clarity is here. Then there is a uniformity across states. Initially, each state followed different labor codes. Now there is a uniformity. Then there is a predictable labor cost because we have something now a minimum that is a floor wage or a minimum wage. So that you can predict the cost. The next fourth one is this will improve the competitiveness for global supply chains. So these are the pro-reform arguments. The trade union argues that investor confidence needs political stability, satisfied workers, and strong domestic demand. Now, what about the social security? Now, the gig platform or the informal workers are formally recognized. So, there will be a wider ESIC and Provident Fund reach for them. And we have also created something known as the National Social Security Fund. However, there are some practical concerns associated because the administrative capacity is currently weak, and we didn't come up with a clear funding mechanism. Okay, so and the informal workers are also too large and they are dispersed. So how are we going to ensure this social security coverage? That becomes a biggest challenge. The next one is the worker employee relations. On one hand, they say that this balances both the workers and the employees, and there are clear industrial relation norms which helps in reducing the disputes. And they have also come up with this women can work at nights with all the safeguards and consents. Whereas the other side says this hire and fire, this will create mistrust among the employers and the employees. That is one thing, and the collective bargaining mechanism has also been totally weakened, and there is also a risk of increased industrial unrest under these circumstances. Okay, these are the key points that you should be knowing from these two articles. Now we will move on to the next one. We will look into this article, why India struggles to clear its air. Okay, the core problem is India faces a recurring winter pollution crisis because responses are short term, reactive, and they are not structural or long term. Okay, now why the governance is failing here? The first one is fragmented air quality governance because too many bodies with overlapping mandates. Example, Ministry of Environment, we have Central Pollution Control Board, State Pollution Control Board, then Commission on Air Quality Management, municipalities, agriculture, transport, etc. So there is no single agency which is fully accountable for for clean air outcomes. And this leads to uneven enforcement, and interstate coordination failures are happening because of this. And sometimes there is also contradictory orders coming from courts, centers, and local bodies. The next one is quick fix politics. That is, government rely on high visibility but low impact measures like cloud seeding mechanisms, or smart towers, water sprinklings, or odd even schemes, or festival crackdowns. Okay, but why? Because it is easy to announce and it fits short term political cycles, and it also avoids confronting the powerful sectors like construction, transport, or agriculture, and it is also cheap and visible. This article says there is politics of pollution wins over the science of pollution. And the third one is there is an intellectual trap, because the expert solutions designed by elite institutions do not match with the municipal capacity, because the policies ignore the low staff and the budget constraints, and there is a weak in enforcement, and informal economies play a major role in cities. The fourth one is the Western trap. India imports global best practices where there are strong regulators, reliable public transport, low informal sector, and there is high civic compliance. However, these doesn't hold good in Indian cities, and that is the biggest problem. And the fifth one is the missing alignment, because India doesn't lack ideas. Okay, rather it lacks the clarity on who leads, and we need stable funding, and we need a cross sector coordination and cooperation. When there are too many bodies or institutions solving one issue, we need this coordination and cooperation. And the other one is institutional continuity. That is, we start with something, then we leave it in between and adopt for a different practices, so that is also a problem. And the other one is enforceable mandates. What India actually needs? We need a clean air law with clear accountability, defined mandates for center, state, local levels, and we also need a coordinating authority. Okay. The second one, we need a stable multi-year funding for long-term programs and also for monitoring system. The third one is there is something known as science managers, that is, who the people who understand science, governance, and politics to translate these research from elite institutions into implementable rules and ideas. Okay, the last one is India adapted solutions. We may get best practices from outside, however these policies must be made fit for Indian realities like budget constraints, informal sector size, and political incentives, and the local municipal capacity. All these should be taken care of. Okay, the next article for the day is Army Chief unveils a roadmap to build future ready force. Okay, this was told in Chanakya Defense Dialogue 2025, and the three-phase transformation plan was also announced here, and it is aligned with Viksit Bharat 2047 and the government's long-term defense reforms. Now, what are the three phases of transformation? The phase one is till 2032, and it is known as the decade of transformation, where we have to focus on rapid capability development, force restructuring, and high operational readiness. Next, the phase 2 is 2032 to 2037, which is a consolidation phase built on the gains of the first decade that we have achieved, and we have to strengthen the integration of the structures, and we have to streamline our doctrines and logistics. Next, the phase 3 is from 2037 to 47, where we have to fully integrate the next gen force, where advanced integrated force design, and we have to be prepared for AI led autonomous cyber as well as quantum warfare. Okay, and he has also given four springboards for military evolution. They are, the first one is Atmanirbharta, that is self reliance. The second one is innovation, like IDEX, Aditi, all these platforms. Next, adaptation, where we have to reform organization as well as the defense ecosystem structures. And the fourth one is integration, that is deep military and civil fusion and stronger tri-service integration. So these are the four springboards that you have to know and the three phases of transformation. Okay, the next article for the day is government announces a scheme to promote research in textiles, and the name of the scheme is Tex Ramps scheme, which is textiles focused research, assessment, monitoring, planning and startup scheme. Okay, it is approved by the center with an outlay of rupees 305 crore, and the objectives of these are to address the critical gaps in research and innovation, data systems, planning and monitoring, and capacity development. And the next article for the day is CBDT nudges taxpayers. Okay, here this is a Central Board of Direct Taxes nudge campaign, which is the second edition. Now, what is this nudge campaign? Which is non-intrusive usage of data to guide and enable taxpayers. And in this initiative, CBDT sends SMS or email alerts to taxpayers to correct or revise their ITRs. So, in this second edition, Central Board of Direct Taxes have detected several taxpayers with undeclared foreign assets, and based on the data from automatic exchange of information agreements with partner countries, they have found this out. And why it matters now is because it strengthens the non-intrusive tax administration and voluntary compliance. Okay. The next article for the day is India's pharma export strength. Here, our pharma exports have reached around $30.46 billion. And the Pharma Export Promotion Council of India, Pharmexcil, is now among the top 5 export councils globally, and it has moved from 5th to 4th place. Now, we should look into what is this Pharmaceutical Export Promotion Council of India. It is the authorized agency of government for promotion of these pharmaceutical exports from India, and it is set up under the provisions of foreign trade policy by the Ministry of Commerce. Okay, and its headquarters is located in Hyderabad. Okay, from this article that you should be knowing that Vikram 1 is a startup's first orbital rocket, which is capable of launching satellites to orbit. Okay. From this article that Indian citizens stop non-EU migration to and from the UK. This title itself serves as a very important key point for your mains answer. That is the only thing that you can take from this article. The next article for the day is India's food coloring O's and steps being taken to combat recurring the issue. Okay, what this article talks is, it talks about a compound known as auramine. Okay, it is an industrial yellow dye which is used in textiles, leather, inks, paper and microbiology labs, and it is not permitted as a food color under FSSAI regulations, and it is also a possible carcinogen, and the health risk includes liver and kidney damages, splenic enlargement and mutagenic effects. Now, how does this auramine enter the food chain? Because it is very cheap and easily available and from informal chemical markets, and small vendors and sweet shops use this to mimic the saffron or the turmeric, and there is also very low awareness regarding the regulations, and weak enforcement is also one of the reason. So what are the steps taken by FSSAI and states? The first one is periodic sampling drives and surprise inspections of smart sweet shops or small vendors, all these places. And they also seizure the unlabeled industrial dyes, and they are being prosecuted under Food Safety and Standards Act 2006. And we are also now strengthening the food testing labs, and we are developing the rapid detection kits for field testing itself rather than sending it to a lab and testing. Now we are focusing on rapid detection kits. We are also training the smaller manufacturers, halwais, and street vendors, and education campaigns are also done during the festival times, because during that time these kind of industrial dyes are used for sweets. Okay, so now what more is needed? The first one is we need tighter control of chemical markets which are selling these industrial dyes, and we also need to enforce stronger penalties for repeated offenders, and we also need to have point of sale testing tools, and continuous consumer awareness should be there to avoid artificially bright foods. Okay, the photo shot of the day is here a girl is being vaccinated, and this is very important. Al Afed camp for displaced people in the town of Al Daba, northern Sudan. Okay. The next place in news is Guinea-Bissau. Why it was in news is there was a military takeover. There was also a coup happened in Guinea-Bissau, and it is in Atlantic Ocean. This is West Africa. This is what is Guinea-Bissau, and it is being surrounded by the Gambia, Guinea, and Mali. Okay, so this you should be knowing. That's all for today. Thank you so much for joining.